Joanna, then Q&A that Greg will facilitate and moderate, and then a wrap up within an hour, hour 10.
Cool. Okay, we are live, so I'm going to turn off my camera and go ahead and admit people, and we can get started.
Yeah, I got it.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah.
No. Oh, cool. Make sure we are muted.
Morning, everybody. Everybody's coming into the call now, coming out of the waiting room and into the call. I'm Greg from Inspired Classroom. Nice to see. Looks like I'm seeing again a bunch of familiar faces and a bunch of familiar masks from the last couple of days. Good job, students. That's awesome. Again, we're gonna kick things off here right away with Chris from World Affairs Council. Go ahead, Chris. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Greg, and our friends at Inspired Classroom. And thank you, students, for joining us for the third day of our 4-day global education extravaganza, the Academic WorldQuest. This is our 17th year, and we're so glad that you could join us. If you missed yesterday, we had an incredible lineup. We had the student-to-student global conversation with a classroom from Egypt. Then we had 3 U.S. ambassadors speaking on, I think somebody's got to go mute there. We had 3 U.S. ambassadors speaking on the Arab Spring. And then we had Ambassador Hisham Yusuf from USIP, the U.S. Institute of Peace, talking about peace in times of conflict. If you missed those and our events on Monday, you can check them out on our YouTube channel. So now, before I introduce our distinguished panel for this morning's event, let me thank our Academic WorldQuest sponsors: the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, First Interstate Bank, High Stakes Foundation, Qatar Foundation International, Allegiance, Trail West Bank, Geisler Steel PC, the Marine and Mike Mansfield Center, the Good Food Store, University of Montana, Montana State University, the United States Institute of Peace, the Montana World Trade Center, and Inspired Classroom. Now, as most of the students know, well, no, not most of the students, as everybody knows, for the past year, we've been living in a pandemic that's taken millions of lives. But the course of events is shifting a little bit with vaccinations taking place. So we have some reason to now look beyond our current situation into a post-pandemic world. This distinguished panel this morning is going to provide their insights on what the post-pandemic economy might look like. Now let me introduce our guests. Brian Brown was born in Billings, Montana, and grew up in Columbus, Montana, where he graduated from high school. Brian attended the University of Wyoming on a football scholarship and graduated with honors with a BS in finance and minors in accounting and banking. He's also a graduate of Pacific Coast Banking School at the University of Washington. Upon graduation from the University of Wyoming, Brian began his career with First Interstate Bank in Billings and has been with the company for 21 years. He started as a teller and has worked in many capacities. Currently, Brian is the Billings Market President. Brigitte Miranda Freer is the Executive Director of the Montana World Trade Center. Brigitte and her team work to strengthen Montana business through international trade. Specifically, the Montana World Trade Center provides prescriptive export strategies, lead generation, project management, export training seminars, inbound and outbound trade missions, as well as export education and hands-on student engagement in day-to-day issues of international business. Joanna Shelton served as Deputy Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris and as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Trade Policy in the George H.W. Bush and Clinton administrations. She also served on the U.S. House of Representatives Ways and Means Committee staff and at the U.S. Treasury Department and the U.S. Trade Representative's Office. Long affiliated with the University of Montana, Ms. Shelton teaches, lectures, and writes on economic policy issues, including a monthly column in the Missoulian. I'm so happy to invite all 3 of you because in one way or another, all 3 of you have also been great supporters of us here at the Montana, at our organization. And so I just want to thank you all again for coming and really appreciate it. Now let me hand over to Greg to kick things off. Over to you, Greg.
Okay, I think we're going to have a intro from Brian, Brigitte, and Joanna, and then we'll turn it over for some questions. Okay. Thanks.
Is that my cue then, Greg?
That is your cue, Brian. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, and we're proud as First Interstate Bank to be a part of this and speaking to a lot of very distinguished young high school students across the state. That I appreciate your guys' attendance and also your attention to the matters at hand and wanting to learn more about where we're at as a state and as a really a national and global economy and what that means. Those are all great questions because this is the first time I think any of us really have ever been a part of this as far as working through a pandemic and how it works and what we're learning. I'll be honest with you here. I've been working from home for about a year now. It was a little over a year ago that we started to have some testing internally about what we can do, our technology internally about how we can do that. And work from home and still be productive. A year later, we're here we are, and we've adapted. We've all adapted in numerous ways to get to where we're at, to maybe go to school, to go to our offices or not go to our offices. So as far as banking goes, I didn't know or really decide, I want to be a banker. I don't know that anybody does that. I love what I do and where I work, and mainly to help businesses and individuals in our communities that we live in. Part of that has been, you've heard of on the news in the mainstream, the PPP program. What is that, the PPP? The Payroll Protection Program. How life after the pandemic? Well, that's a great question because we're not through it yet. I can give you a little bit of insight about what we've been as a banking industry, not just First Interstate Bank, but as a banking industry have been dealing with to help our economies within the communities in Montana and really around the country. Payroll Protection Program, that is, the PPP is money that has been set aside and allocated by the federal government through the banking institutions in and through businesses, small, medium, and large to some degree throughout our country. Why did they pick the banks to do this? Well, that's a great question, and that I've posed there, but it has been very chaotic for us, not just First Interstate, but the banking institutions to get that money to our clients. It makes sense the banks were asked to be the conduit to do this because we have the relationships with the businesses, whether it's a depository relationship or a loan relationship. We all know and see that the hospitality industry a lot and primarily has been hurt through this pandemic with closures of restaurants, bars, casinos, live concerts, entertainment. But some have flourished. Some industries have flourished. Hardware stores, people are at home doing projects more, those types of things. However, it still was an adjustment and a pivot for everybody to try to maintain their level of business when things literally got shut down almost overnight. So the Payroll Protection Program was a program that was approved through the federal government to get working capital dollars into the pockets of the businesses. And when you see and feel how the trickle down effect came through that, if someone had to lay somebody off, whichever way you go, let's start from the business perspective. They have employees. Employees are made up of all of us, our families, our moms, our dads, our sisters, brothers. If they don't have a job, they're not buying groceries, they're not putting gas in their car, they're not injecting it into the economy. And at a high level saying injecting money into the economy, we felt as an industry that this was something that was forced upon us, but it was necessary to keep everything moving in our economies and in our communities. We literally, as a banking institution, had to make programs overnight, software programs, people that are smarter than I am in this computer science side of things, to make programs overnight to have people apply, get the dollars, and get them injected into their business to help keep people on staff, to pay their bills, to give the individuals the payroll that they needed to continue to basically live. And if you think about it that way, that's a pretty heavy lift. And I'm not saying on the banking industry, that's a pretty heavy lift from our entire country. As far as the forgiveness piece. So these dollars were supposed to be used and are supposed to be used for specific purposes to continue to help keep businesses online and running. After they spend the money on the necessary operations from payroll to rent and lease or loan payments, they apply for forgiveness through the financial institution in which they receive their money. And then if they meet all the parameters, which almost everybody does, the federal government forgives that loan. How does the bank get paid? Because we get the money from the federal government, we give it to the individuals and the businesses, then they use it, then they pay our loan back. They pay our loan back through the government and the federal government saying this loan is forgiven, meaning doesn't have to be paid back to the federal government. That's the whole basis for this, is that some people say, is it free money? Well, to some degree it might be a little bit here and there, but it's necessary for us to keep living the way we're living to some degree. Otherwise, you would have seen a lot more fallout of businesses. There were some that went away initially because they were on the margin anyway and not as strong. But without this payroll protection program, you would have seen drastic economic downturn, people out of jobs, businesses going away, and that sort of thing. So we're proud to be a part of that. As a bank in our communities in which we live here in Montana and our other 5 states that we're in as First Interstate Bank, but every bank that had a client that was part of the PPP really was the conduit and helped continue to keep things afloat. I feel personally, even as we kind of, I think we're nearing the end. At least there's a light at the end of the tunnel with vaccine rollouts, and just even in the last week, there's a new vaccine with Johnson & Johnson single dose, more distribution. People are having more access to that. That will help alleviate this sooner rather than later to some degree as we go through. But also, I heard this morning that on CBS News that there's going to be, or at least there's talk in other countries about COVID passport, if you will, that if you have this COVID passport, you can travel, you can get into certain bars and restaurants. And that, of course, has a lot of implications we won't get into now. But when we say life after the pandemic, do we need a COVID passport to get into a restaurant or to travel? What if you don't want to take the vaccine because of medical concerns? What if you can't take the vaccine because of medical concerns or don't want to because of your personal beliefs? All these things are questions that are up in the air, and I'm not here to debate those. I'm just saying nobody knows, and if they do, what life after the pandemic will be like. It's ever changing, just like it's ever changing the last year, every day, literally every hour that we've been a part of this. So I hope that gives you a little more insight into what, as far as a banking system in the country was a part of to kind of help keep things moving forward in our economy. Thank you, and I'll wait to be prompted with Greg and others of any questions you might have.
Great, thanks, Brian. That's one of those deals where if we had a crystal ball, we could do real well knowing what things are really going to be like here in a little bit. Okay, Miss Miranda Freer, we're going to go to you next. Thanks.
Hi there. I have to say a COVID passport sounds like the least fun kind of passport stamp I can imagine, but I guess it's going to be necessary maybe. So, hey everyone, I am Brigitta, and you heard in the intro there, I'm the director of Montana World Trade Center. We're housed at the University of Montana, just to give you a little context about where I am speaking to you from today. But we're part of the Global World Trade Centers Association network, and that includes 300 World Trade Centers in about 100 countries around the globe. So, hey. I think you're in day 3 of this, and although I haven't seen all the sessions, yeah, I see head shaking. You'll be relieved to know that I will be not presenting you with graphs today, and I really wanted to approach our conversation today by looking at what's the same, what's not, and what does that mean for you? So hopefully that works for you all. I see a couple heads shaking. Thank you, Ellie. So let's start with what's the same. I told you I wasn't going to show you any graphs today, and I'll be true to my word there. But if we were to look at some statistics on the composition of Montana's exports today, they'd look pretty similar to what we've seen over the last decade. And that's to say that they're predominantly agricultural and extractive exports with a little dash of manufactured products mixed in, some for heavy industry, and some for consumers. But you know what you wouldn't find? Well, you really wouldn't find any hard stats at all about Montana's service exports. So this gets to the part of my comments where I talk about what's different. So what do I mean when I say service exports? Well, it can be something like consulting, and higher education fits into this bucket when we welcome international students into our Montana university system. There's a bunch of things that fit into service exports. But maybe actually most importantly for all of you, things like software as a service or platform as a service or infrastructure as a service fit into this bucket. So, you know, think about firms like Submittable here in Missoula, Montana, Oracle and Bozeman, Cognizant, and many others that have a presence in our state, as well as those to come. These are highly scalable, globally oriented business models. So for a number of years now, probably starting somewhere around the time where you all were in elementary school, Montana's economy has really been diversifying quickly. We've moved beyond our agricultural and our extractive roots. Don't get me wrong. These industries were important and they will remain important for our economy for the foreseeable future. But now we also have myriad knowledge-based industries across our state. And many of these industries are evidenced by startups that have taken hold in Montana. So these are our homegrown success stories like the Submittables that are out there. And in some cases, we have firms moving in or establishing branch offices in the vibrant small cities that exist across Montana, or they're allowing their employees to work remotely from Montana. So what does that mean for you? Jobs. That's what that means for you. And good paying jobs. I think that's technically well paying, but that sounds weird. So I'm going to go with good paying jobs. If you want to stay in Montana, your opportunities to do so have really increased pretty dramatically over the course of the last decade. Now, we are still stuck in a pandemic-induced employment crisis. Yes. Is it likely that most of you won't have a ton of success with your waiting tables kind of jobs this summer? Yes, but there's an end in sight now. And the promised land isn't just a vaccination, it's diversification of our economy so that you can get a job in the field that you want to get a job in Montana. And I know I'm seeing some heads shake there. I hope that that's actually good news for you all. And even if many of you decide that you're going to spread your wings and head out of the state for a time, I think you may be surprised to find how many people want to come back to this state. And so maybe you'll be in that bucket. I know as a parent, I'm thrilled that there are opportunities for my high school age children to stick around if they want, or to come back and work in the field of their choice. So while we have some short-term pain still complicating things, we have seen a fundamental shift in how knowledge-based industries think about locating their firms and their workforce. And that's good for Montana, and that's good for you. 25 years ago, that long ago, yes. 25 years ago, when I left the Beltway in Washington, D.C. to move to Montana, it was a very common joke from my work colleagues at the time to ask whether or not I would actually have running water in my house. Because I'm a wise guy, I said, no, but you're welcome to come anytime. I don't know why they didn't. But now that chatter has completely changed. And what we're seeing is growth in the Rocky Mountain region of the United States surging, and in-migration surging. The secret's out. You know, we're a cool place to live. And the thing that I see that has really changed in recent years, and that knowledge-based firms have become more acutely aware of over the course of the pandemic, is that cool place to live also translates into loyal talent. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that one of the single largest headaches that knowledge-based industries have is holding on to their employees. Turnover, so that's when employees leave their job, it's a killer. That firm has to go through the process of rehiring and has to absorb all over again the costs associated with onboarding that employee. They have decreased productivity due to turnover. So what these firms are learning is that if they let their employees live in a place like Montana, or if they establish operations in a place like Montana, it can positively impact their bottom line because they experience lower turnover. They don't have to spend all that money constantly on restaffing, and that has a net positive impact on their earnings, and that is good news for us and you. So in addition to cloud computing, which covers all those things like software as a service that I referenced before, another knowledge-based industry that has gained some real traction in Montana, and I think will be really important for all of you all, is bioscience. Now that's a very broad category, but in short, bioscience basically has to do with fueling, feeding, and healing the world. So suffice to say that researchers coming out of the University of Montana and Montana State University, and I know you've heard from both of them this week, have proven themselves as best-in-class researchers globally. And consequently, right here in Montana, we're developing technologies and performing research that leads to the creation of new bioscience technologies and new companies. In Western Montana right now, we're seeing, for an example, an uptick in commercialization related to pharmaceutical research and development. And again, this had been trending upward for the better part of the last decade. But there's nothing like a pandemic to underscore the need for a robust bioscience ecosystem in our state and in our nation. GlaxoSmithKline, this is a major pharmaceutical firm. They have operations right outside of Hamilton, Montana. Maybe some of you know that. It's interesting. You drive and you're just sort of in the middle of a field, and then all of a sudden there's this massive, couple $100 million structure in the middle of that field with security. That's GSK. A year ago, they announced a $100 million expansion to that firm. Now, that doesn't just mean jobs for scientist types. That means jobs for facilities managers, for technicians, and for office personnel. And about a month ago, Tonix, this is another pharmaceutical firm, they announced they'll be setting up shop next to GlaxoSmithKline. We've got bioscience startups like Inimune and Fire Diagnostics that are crushing it right now. They're crushing it. Inimune just raised the largest Series A round in our state, and you may not know what that's about yet, or you may, but that means they got $22 million from a venture capital fund to do what they do, and that's a big deal. As part of my job, I actually oversee operations at Montech, which is the Montana Technology Enterprise Center. It's a technology incubator right across from the University of Montana. And we're bursting at the seams right now with bioscience firms that need more space. So in fact, we're actually planning for an innovation corridor gateway project there to provide more space for bioscience firms, kind of as a foundation there. And what we envision is a place for best-in-class firms from startups to Fortune 100 companies right here in Missoula, Montana. So think about it, that next big cognitive leap forward that helps us to solve for pressing bioscience issues of today and tomorrow. It's not tied to geography, it's tied to intellectual capital. It's tied to the people right here in our state, including you, that have the presence of mind and audacity of spirit to think that you're the ones that are responsible for making a difference. So what I see post-pandemic is Montana continuing to be very well positioned to capitalize on knowledge-based industries, finally realizing maybe that the risks outweigh the benefits of siting exclusively in large cities, and they're taking proactive steps to look at a business model that includes workforce or even a physical location in Montana. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Joanna. Thanks.
Well, good morning, and good morning to all of you around Montana. And picking up on what Brigitte just said, let me just say that I am located in the Mission Valley, actually in Moise, about an hour north of Missoula. And I'll just underscore what she just said. My husband and I moved here from Paris, France. Before that, we were in Washington, D.C. And the reason we could move here and continue our involvement and our interest in international affairs is because we have high-speed internet. The University of Montana is, as I say, an hour away, so we both have taught there, continue to teach there. I take part in international conferences. I stay in touch with people around the world from here in my study in Moise, Montana. So we were perhaps a little ahead of the curve, but I will just underscore, and I will say we have a farm and we raise hay for the local bison range and for cattle and the horses that we have here and elsewhere. So we've mixed our careers an awful lot and love being here in Montana. What I'd like to do as I shift this discussion to the world and the global economy is first to just demystify things a little bit. I'd like to just say that when you look at an economy and you measure its size and you measure its growth, you do that by counting all of the goods and all the services that are produced in that economy or country over a period of time, let's say a year. On goods, we're looking at everything from pencils to automobiles to aircraft and everything in between. Services, as Brigitte just pointed out, include consulting, et cetera. They also include the local mom and pop retail store, big and small banks like Brian's, and then to what we're doing now, education. The United States is the world's largest economy. We last year produced about $20 trillion in goods and services. And that translates into about 15% of all the goods and services produced in the world. And when we talk about the world or the global economy, basically all we do is add up all of the goods and services produced in every country or economy around the world. And today there are almost 200 countries. All of those countries are connected to a greater or lesser extent through trade, investment, and financial flows like bank loans across borders. And what that means is that what happens in one economy can affect other economies. The United States, as the world's largest economy, has a big impact on others through trade, investment, and financial flows. So if our economy is doing well, other countries can benefit from that as well by exporting more to us. They invest here. By the same token, if our economy slumps, we can cause other economies to weaken as well. Now, it is very rare to have all economies in the world moving in the same direction at the same time. Usually there are some ups and some downs, fluctuations around the world. But with the COVID pandemic, we have seen all economies hit hard, most of them hit quite hard. And as a result, this COVID pandemic has resulted in the worst economic downturn, both in the United States and in the world since World War II. The widespread shutdown of businesses, of travel, of normal life as we know it has caused tremendous economic and social disruption. And you only have to think about your own lives to see how it has affected everything from the way we get our education, to our shopping habits, to whether or not there are jobs available for you, for your family, and for friends. Now, the US economy last year shrank by about 3.5%, and that was bad, but most other countries fared worse. Ironically, China, where the COVID pandemic began, has bounced back fastest and faster than other countries, and it actually grew a little bit last year. China was the only country to actually have positive growth last year. All others shrank. Now, what impacts are we seeing and what are we likely to see in the future from this COVID pandemic? Well, one thing that we are seeing already is increased inequality, both within countries and among countries. In the United States, about 22 million people lost their jobs last spring. Here we are in March of 2021, and about half of those people are still out of work or have given up looking for jobs. The worst hit among those people who have lost jobs are women, minorities, and young people like you. And we can talk more about why that is if you'd like in the discussion period. Now, if you look at the impact across countries, you find that in lower income countries, for example, in Africa, Latin America, Asia, they too have been hit very hard. And they have much less in the way of social safety nets like unemployment insurance, food stamps, and other things that help cushion the fall. They don't have PPP programs, for example, can't afford them. The World Bank estimates that up to 150 million more people in the world are likely to fall into severe poverty this year. And by that, they mean people who earn less than $1.90 a day. And that will reverse all of the progress that has been made over the past 3 decades in reducing global poverty. A second big impact that COVID will have is it will accelerate some of the structural changes in our economies and in our societies. I mean, for example, you look at some businesses like airlines and hotels, the whole hospitality and travel industry. Those businesses may not return to pre-pandemic levels of activity for many years. And that'll have a very negative impact on employees in those industries. We will also see, as we are experiencing right now, much more use of technology in the workplace and in education. That trend was already underway, but certainly the COVID pandemic has accelerated it. And as Brian was saying, they've learned how effectively they can work at home and remain productive. And that is true as well in other industries. Now, with the move online, that has the effect of even further increasing inequality. And the reason for that is, I mean, I'm very fortunate here in Moise, Montana, on the Flathead Indian Reservation to have high-speed internet. Without that, we wouldn't be here. But as a general matter, people in rural areas and lower income people in cities and around the country often have worse access to internet, and that puts them at a great disadvantage for online education and for online working. So they fall further behind than they already were. Now, looking ahead, we already see signs of economic recovery from the COVID shutdowns, both in the United States and in other countries. But I think the recovery is going to look a lot like a roller coaster. There are going to be ups and downs, some loops back, some setbacks. And so it's not going to be a smooth ride forward. We will not recover, the economy will not recover fully until the COVID virus is under control and people can move about more freely. When that, I mean, as to when that's going to happen, that's going to depend very heavily on rates of vaccination and on when our country can achieve the so-called herd immunity so that people will voluntarily return to their normal lives. Even if businesses are told that they can open, there are a lot of people who may say, I'm really not comfortable going inside a restaurant or a theater. And until they do, nothing will go fully back to normal. I will also add, as Brian has very eloquently pointed out, that the fiscal support, the support from the federal government to companies, to individuals, has been a tremendous support in our economy. Without that, as he said, our whole economy would have suffered far more greatly and would have shrunk far worse. So, as we look ahead here in the next year or so, the future definitely looks brighter, but there are a lot of uncertainties on the horizon. And I know I speak for all of us when I say we can't wait till we can get back to a new normal and be in classrooms, be with friends, travel, and have life more as we knew it before. So thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
All right, great. Thanks, you guys. So students and teachers, we're going to do this the same way we've done this the last couple of days. Most of you are familiar since I'm seeing mostly familiar faces. Put your questions in the chat, and then we'll go to the chat, and I will ask you and have you turn your cameras on and your mics on, and I'll again tell you in the chat ahead of time privately who's coming up next, and we'll do questions that way. I do want to mention that I heard I appreciate Brigitte when you were speaking how you referenced body language from some of the people and the people that don't have their cameras on. I've been doing this video conferencing thing for 15 years, and I struggle with the whole idea is so we can see each other. So thank you for noticing that. And again, if you want to ask a question, you will need to turn your cameras on to do that. So We'll see some questions coming up in the chat soon, I would imagine. I'm not seeing any quite yet.
Greg, that just means we answered every possible question they had already. We nailed it.
Well, come on now. These are no. Gardner's right up. Gardner's on this. They're and you will see pretty quick the questions will be coming fast and furious. She had to go get her paper. So, you know, Gardner, since you guys are first, why don't you just go ahead and unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
All right, thank you. So my name is Maya. I'm a sophomore at Gardner, and you may not know, but Gardner's a pretty small town. So in some small towns, such as Gardner, tourism fuels the service and hospitality industries. However, there's been a large increase in the number of vacation rentals, and my guess would be that around 80% of the vacation rentals in our town are owned specifically by just two separate parties or families, and this limits available long-term housing, and rent locally skyrockets as well. So while more visitors are staying in our town and supporting our local businesses because of our proximity to Yellowstone, many, especially young locals, have no chance but to move out because of the extreme costs of living, especially when many businesses are open only in the summer, like rafting, etc., and even some restaurants. So we see a decrease in school enrollment and just our general population, especially when it comes to winter. So my question for the panel today is how this trend may affect the economies of towns like Gardner, both with and without COVID.
So, Joanna, Brigitte, and Brian, what we'll do is we'll go in the same order. When the questions are general questions that the students are looking for answers from all three of you, in other words, not specifically to one of you, we'll stay in that same order, and you guys don't have to let me cue you to the next person. You guys, Brian, you can go first, then Brigitte and Joanna, and you guys can all take a stab at that. Thanks.
Well, first of all, that was a very thoughtful and deep question at a very high level. Looking at it from a local perspective, and just so you guys know, the picture behind me, I'm not really standing outside on the street corner right in front of our bank. It's a stock photo, and however, we have a bank in Gardner, First Interstate Bank. We do have a bank in Gardner. And we have a bank in Livingston, and we have banks in Bozeman and the Gallatin Valley there, along with the rest of the state. So we try to be as in tune as possible with what's going on in our local community and how we support our local community. The question you have is very very good and deep and on a macro basis. I recently spoke with the chief financial officer of KOA, Campgrounds of America. They have their headquarters, world headquarters here in Billings. And you're exactly right about the shift in recreation or travel from the ability to not be able to, or the inability to travel, I guess, as freely as we were able to once before the pandemic on airlines. People are shifting to domestic travel a lot. They're shifting to the RVs, the campgrounds, the rentals. And right now, I don't know about you guys, but I think all of us at some level are just itching to go see stuff, do stuff, be in our, and it's a long winter. It's been cold here just recently, but now it's, it's March. That sounds better than February and January. People want to get out and go do stuff. So you will see that increase in traffic in places like Gardner, where you live, and the Big Skies and Bozeman's and Flathead. Even to some degree, Eastern Montana, it's not as probably widely trafficked to come to see for tourism, but those problems are real. And I grew up in a small town. I grew up in Columbus, which is just west of Billings here, a small town, about 1,200 people. But it's close enough to Billings where it's more or less a bedroom community. People drive back and forth for jobs, so it's not maybe as isolated. I don't mean that in a bad way as Gardner, but the market. When we say the market, what is the market? It's this animal. It's this force that we can't see or know exactly what it is, but it's what happens in supply and demand, just macroeconomics. And I'm speaking kind of way out of turn here. Joanna, you know way more about macroeconomics than I do. I took a couple classes in college, but but the fact of the matter is that, first of all, I'll just admit I don't have a great answer to remedy what you're talking about in Gardner. But as the forces of nature of our market has changed, that I don't know that there's reeling back in, because the more people want to do this and need to get out and change their habits, that's going to continue to force those communities as Gardner to be even more of a resort town. And Gardner, the business owners, the city government around there, they may have to adapt and change to take advantage of that opportunity in a way to increase revenues somehow. I mean, we're in Montana, our hands are tied to some degree about how we can raise money, whether from local option sales tax, which we can't do, to basically just property taxes and income tax. But I think the income or the evolution of a town like Gardner, for example, since you live there, local leadership, with the help of state and to some degree maybe federal, will have to try to evolve in a way to create more jobs, to capitalize on the tourism that comes through. That's a very high level question, and a very good one. I will pass it on to the other two to give us more insight.
I didn't catch your name at the beginning there. Was it Byam who asked the question?
Maya.
Maya. Okay.
Yeah.
Maya. Okay. So Maya, being a cool place to live brings opportunities and it brings challenges. And the question that you just asked there, and that challenge that Gardner is wrestling with, and that opportunity that it has, is something that is being faced across many communities in Montana. And if you actually figure out the answer to that someday, you should be mayor or governor. So just tuck that in the back of your head. But, I think on the challenge front, what you're talking about there is you're essentially a resort community, and your own, residents are getting priced out of being able to live there. I would encourage you and your community to be very proactively now, and hopefully they have already been looking into this, looking at some models of what other places in the United States try to do to create an affordable housing solution for, the people that want to stick around there, that are from there, that may not just be kind of diving into town just to, for a week or two every year. Places like Vail are interesting in that the city of Vail is very much involved in an affordable housing solution. I think they actually own some ground upon which they have some, they actually do a lottery for workforce housing there. I'm not saying that's the only solution. I'm saying, but now is the time to be looking at those models, because you know what? It's not going to get better in terms of that pain point for your community. Because like I said before, the secret's out, right? Not only is it a cool place to visit, it's a cool place to live. So getting out in front of that as much as possible is something that I hope that your city there, the city of Gardner, is really kind of diving into. And then the second thing I'll say, though, I mean, it's not all bad news there. I mean, when you have people visiting this state because there are amazing things to see and experience here, we do have an opportunity as a state to kind of, there's this phrase, turn postcards into business cards, right? So people are vacationing in a place like that, and they send their friends postcards, and then maybe they start thinking, well, what's the business case to be in a place like this? Could I imagine myself in a place like this for more than just a few days a year, or just passing through? And that's where I think places like Gardner and elsewhere in our state have to get really intentional about creating that business case. So making sure, for example, that you do have decent internet connectivity there, right? That the school system that's in place is high quality, and it seems like it must be, particularly given all you. So that folks that may be just passing by could imagine being there for a longer period of time and becoming a part of that community. And when that happens, they often bring their, some wealth with them from the outside, or some professional expertise from the outside that can kind of open up new avenues to other possible, business opportunities that could be happening in Gardner. So sometimes people just bring their jobs with them, and then once they're there, they have sort of this satellite operation, and they start hiring some people. So good and bad. That's all I have to say on that. Joanna, I'll kick it to you.
Well, I don't have much to add, and I'd like to allow time for more questions, so I'll just keep it very brief. I would just underscore what Brigitte just said. When I was at the OECD in Paris, one of the things that the OECD is best known for is looking at countries around, the membership and even countries who are not formally members, and looking in various areas like education or healthcare or tax policies, what has worked in other countries and what doesn't work, and then trying to distill from that, how might that work for our country? And I have a suggestion. A school project you might want to undertake, picking up on what Brigitte just said. Why don't you take a look at Vail? And even Missoula, I know, is trying to look at creating more affordable housing. Take a look at some Western towns that have experienced rapid growth, particularly in the past, and see how they have taken steps to adapt, and sort of what has worked and what hasn't. And that could be a really interesting school project, but it could also be of great benefit to the town of Gardner. So I'll just end it at that and take more questions here.
Absolutely.
Good luck. Good luck. I would say good luck, Maya. And it is an excellent question. Yes, thank you.
And absolutely, and we definitely have a lot of questions coming in, and I think Brigitte, I think you hit it on the head again. We've got an excellent school system there in Gardner, just because they're involved in. And one of the reasons, because they're involved in this. I mean, this really cool World Affairs program that we got going on. So we're going to go to Columbia Falls, and I'm going to just give Capital the heads up. Capital, you'll be next with your question. But we're going to go to Columbia Falls now and get a question from them. Thanks.
All right, I'll just read it out loud here. Everybody sees it. Economically, during a crisis like this pandemic, how should governments go about balancing the aid to individuals disadvantaged and businesses? I made some points here to try to keep my comments brief. We can get to other comments or questions here too. But another great question, and these are very thought-provoking. But I think with the aid that has occurred through the CARES Act and the PPP and all that, the intention is right. The intention is always good to get the money where it needs to be. However, there's going to be people and businesses that take advantage of that. So not just with the aid that has happened with some of these specific programs, in my opinion, on a very local and kind of more microeconomic basis, but it generates or it resonates throughout the rest of the country. There's got to be public-private partnerships, and people have to be okay with that. People have to be okay with that, with subsidies from state and federal and local government to help private developers, whether it's through affordable housing and residences, through startup capital for businesses, through aid to people that maybe have lost their job and unemployment, through mental health and substance abuse centers. Those are all pieces of our economy that need public and private partnerships, and we have to be okay with that. Where does that public money come from? That comes from all of us, everybody that has a job and pays taxes, and we have to be okay with that. Because private development is not always going to pencil out if it is for the benefit of the macro and the sociology of the entire community. And when it doesn't pencil out for private developers, guess what? They're not going to invest. And guess what? We can't, as a bank, loan money to those individuals when I say pencil out, if it doesn't make money to repay the loans back. That's how it works. So I'll leave it at that there has to be some public-private partnerships on a lot of levels to make this work, and people have to be okay with that thought process, in my opinion. Thank you.
At the risk of throwing a monkey wrench in this, I think Joanna should go next, given her background, but I'll jump in. Is that okay with you, Joanna?
Sure. I don't, yeah,
Sorry.
I think in terms, I'm sort of going back here to my years of working on Capitol Hill in Washington, where politics is always a tug of war and a choice. How do you allocate money? And of course, now we have an enormous fiscal deficit and debt that also people are concerned about, but less so now during a major pandemic. I think in terms of how you decide whether to support businesses or individuals, I think that we learned a lot out of the 2008, 2009 global financial crisis that started as a housing crisis. I think there was just, rightly so, a lot of criticism at that time that the federal government stepped in to bail out banks whose loans had gone bad. They did help, again, prevent a worse collapse in the economy and the financial system than would have occurred otherwise. But how many millions of individual homeowners lost their homes, their places to live, because they weren't helped out? That was, I think, a very right criticism, that you shouldn't just help out businesses, but you also have to focus on the individuals involved. And so I think that in this period where we've seen the government step in at the federal level, providing aid to states, who then provided on to others, I think that there has been a good balance between support to businesses, particularly now trying to focus more on small businesses, but also individuals. There has really been an attention to the fact that you can't just have individuals out there either homeless or not able to eat, not able to pay for medicines, and have an economy that is going to do well. So I think they've struck a balance. It may not always be perfect, but I think, again, a lot was learned from the last financial crisis and was improved upon this time. Over to you, Miranda. Brigida, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That happens all the time. So I just jotted down a few things. Yes to public-private partnerships as part of the solution. Yes to getting money out the door quickly. And I guess my last thought here is that, we've essentially been stopping the hemorrhaging with what we've done of the federal dollars that are flowing into our economies over the last few months. But you all know, when you get an injury, and a pretty big one, it's not over when you put a Band-Aid on it, right? I mean, there's a lot more healing to do. And what you have to do as a person, and what we have to do, as a society, then is make sure that, we're setting the stage, we're doing the right things to heal ourselves, to heal ourselves personally, to heal our economy. So, I would love to see something. I hope that as a result of this pandemic, it actually has shined a light on, well, I know it has shined a light on some of the major inequities, and that we will see some structural changes in terms of how we decide to care for people in the world, how we lend money to businesses in the world, and the disparities that, have existed, and who gets those loans. I would love to see us go big with an infrastructure kind of a program that really is transformational for some of the places in the United States that are sort of geographically disadvantaged. Well, for everyone, but I mean, we've just talked about broadband as part of this conversation, and how important that is in terms of the business case for attracting new businesses and new investments to either grow there or come to your communities. So what are we doing on that front? What will we do for renewables to really change our economic drivers? So anyway, I would love to see a transformational investment in kind of infrastructure that helps to rise, the tide for everyone. So that's all. Great.
And hey, you guys, presenters, if you feel the order needs to be changed as far as answering the questions, you guys are the experts. So absolutely step in there and change the order, throw a monkey wrench however you want. That's awesome. So, okay, Miranda, we're going to go to Miranda at Capitol High School. She wants to ask a question. So Miranda, take it away.
Yeah, I'm Miranda. I'm from Capitol High School, and I just wanted to ask if other states with similar qualities to Montana have experienced the same attraction of businesses people and economic opportunities recently?
Yeah, that's a great question as well, Miranda. Thanks for your asking it. The Zoom boom. We're on a Zoom meeting right now. That's a term that I didn't make up. I heard recently too throughout this whole deal that in migration to states and communities that are desirable. And what does that mean? Well, maybe it means people moving back that have moved away, that have lived in now bigger metropolitan areas. They want to move back to Montana, Idaho, the Northwest, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, and North Dakota, a little more rural, but they have the ability, just like Joanna said, where she's at, she loves it, but she has broadband, and that's one of the reasons why, but she can have a little elbow room. Hey, great. To each their own. People now can work from home a lot better and be more productive. So the short answer is yes. Idaho, I think, has one of the biggest in-migrations from other areas, the Boise area. I mean, even though that's been a growing population for a long time, it's still a desirable area compared to other maybe larger metropolitan areas in the country. And definitely Montana, we have the allure of being Montana anyway, and we have the ability and the luck to live here. So the answer is yes, and I see that continuing, especially as things have changed last year.
Yes. Hello, my namesake, Miranda. Absolutely happening. And I was just in a conversation with my colleagues from World Trade Center Denver and World Trade Center in Utah, and they're experiencing the same kind of thing. So, yep.
And I don't have anything to add on that. I think, yes, so maybe we can go to the next question.
You guys, it's interesting because here I'm coming to you from Bend, Oregon, working remotely, was able to choose when I retired from teaching in Alaska. And a couple of things have come up. The one question about the things that are happening in Gardner are happening here in Central Oregon. And there's some moratoriums about what property can be developed and things like that. And just the fact that it's a very desirable place, and the whole ideas that you guys are talking about are very relevant. So yes, it is happening in other places. Okay, Brooke, and I do know that Brooke and Ellie have a very similar question, so I just wanted to get Ellie's name out there and let you know that she's thinking of some of the same things, but we're going to go to Brooke for a question. Thanks, you guys.
Hi, my name's Brooke, and I go to school at Bozeman High School, and my question for you is, what are your thoughts on the proposal to raise the minimum wage to $15, and how would that affect the post-pandemic economy?
This is Brian, and we recently at First Interstate Bank raised our minimum hiring wage to $15. And I say recently, within the past 6 months during the middle of the pandemic. The reason for that is that we want to attract as highly skilled workers as possible. And yes, $15 an hour is a pretty good wage to start out. How does that affect other businesses, such as maybe smaller businesses, hospitality industry, restaurants, and the like? It can really strain their cash flow if they are required to pay the $15. I'm not saying that because I'm for or against it. I'm just saying the fact of the matter is that it will really strain some small businesses to have to try to maintain that minimum wage. And then at the end of the day, it all trickles down to us as consumers when we go into a store. I was just in Missoula this last weekend to see my son, who's a sophomore there at the University of Montana. We went to Rockin' Rudy's. I don't know if anybody you guys know Rockin' Rudy's. It's just a huge shop of a bunch of great stuff. But at the end of the day, the T-shirt or the candles we bought, instead of being $15, might be $20. It all trickles down, and it all will affect us as consumers. So that's I guess on a general basis how I see it. But I think in order to, like, for us, First Interstate, we made it a strategic play to raise our wage to $15 an hour in order to attract a better, higher skilled, more type of employment base. So I'll stop there.
So
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joanna. No, go ahead. It's fine.
Well, I was just thinking about this. I originally didn't think I had necessarily a lot to say, but I think that, as Brian said, it's a real dilemma. And as I'm sure you know, Brooke and Ellie, there are costs and benefits. Certainly some small businesses might have a very, very tough time. One thought that occurs to me right away, and I don't think this has been part of the debate, but it could be exempting businesses below a certain size. So for example, if you have fewer than 15 employees, for example, you're a restaurant, or 20 employees, perhaps that could be exempt or phased in. But I do agree, I think there's something wrong when people are working full time and they can't, they're still on social assistance because they can't earn enough to support their families. One thing that this really reveals is the shift in our economy in recent years, decades. The manufacturing industry in our country and most others, they generally offer the highest wages and benefits of businesses. What we've seen as both through automation and globalization, with investments shifting overseas, the number of people employed in the manufacturing sector has been declining steadily. More and more people now are employed in services, and many of those are in the lower paid service areas like restaurants, hospitality, et cetera. And that is a structural change in our economy that really does pose dilemmas, because again, what that feeds into is the inequality that we were talking about. There's no easy answer, but I think that we're not going to see the return of the number of manufacturing jobs we had. And while a lot, as Brigitte mentioned, a lot of the service industries like software development and the like, those are high paid. Still, we're not going to change the landscape that has a lot of people employed in these lower paid retail. So, as I say, one option might be to exempt certain smaller, very small businesses from that requirement, but encourage them to increase. So anyway, over to you, Brigitte.
So when my husband and I were hatching this plan to move to Montana, like 25 years ago, I thought to myself, well, there's no international business happening there, so I'm going to get my teacher certification and teach Spanish. And I got that, and I remember coming out to Montana. Well, we were just going to move out west somewhere. And I remember coming out to Montana for a job interview at a really lovely little school in Montana, and I really liked the administration, and I got a chance to meet a couple of students, and I thought, oh yeah, this is kind of idyllic. And they I think even like kind of that day, the next day, I don't know, they called me and they said, hey, we'd love to offer you the job, and the starting salary is $17,500 and partial benefits. And like, you can't see, but right now I still have goosebumps on my arm, because I remember getting that call and I was like, oh, that's how does anyone live on that, right? And the problem has only gotten worse since then. And the thing is, you really can't live on that, right? You have to figure out then having other work. And so I'll tell you, obviously, because of what we saw with the next COVID relief package, and I don't think there's the political appetite to get the $15 per hour minimum wage passed, which is too bad. I really do think we have to be, as a society, we have to be on a trajectory to get there. When was the last time we updated the federal minimum wage? I don't know. Isn't it still like $8 something?
Yes, it is.
It's terrible. Do the math. What does that translate to in terms of, if you're working your butt off and you are working, 2,080 hours, which, is the 40 times 52 weeks, which you won't, because you'll need a little bit of time off. It doesn't matter. You cannot get ahead. You cannot survive on that. You're always going to be in the hole. So I think we need to make a shift as a society on that front. I don't think it can happen immediately, because businesses are teetering on the brink right now, and it can be something as simple as that like they just close up shop, right? So I think it does have to be a gradual shift that we make, but I'd like to see us start that way.
I'm just going to throw in a 2-second intervention here. And one thing that strikes me again is when you look at the growing disparity between CEO pay and the pay of large companies, the pay of people at the top, and what the employees are getting, that gap has been widening, and it's the greatest in the United States as compared to any other country. So, again, here we have a situation where those at the top keep getting more and those at the bottom are struggling to get more. So anyway, on to the next question, because I know there are a lot and we only have a few minutes left.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Okay, we're going to go to Riley. Riley's going to turn his camera on and he's got a question for you guys.
Okay, I'm a girl, but
Oh, I'm sorry, Riley. I apologize.
But hi, my name is Riley Work. I am a junior here at Hayes Lodge School, and Hayes Lodge School is on the Fort Benham Indian Reservation in northwestern Montana. So I guess my question is, do you guys have any influence on the economy on the Native American reservations across the country, maybe helping with funding or with jobs, anything like that?
Well, can I?
Riley, hi.
Oh.
So sorry to interrupt. In Billings, we live right next to the Crow Indian Reservation and the Northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation. And we have a bank on the reservation in Lane Deer. We have a bank in Hardin, just on the very border of the Crow Reservation. And then we also have banks in Colstrip and Miles City, which are in and around those two reservations. Furthermore, further west, yes, we do have banks in and around the reservations that you're talking about, and up in the Flathead area too. I can speak specifically to my involvement personally, but also as a bank with the Indian reservations here near Billings. Yes, we do have a good relationship with both the Crow and the Northern Cheyenne. In fact, I was just on a conference call last week to talk to leadership with both tribes about how we as a bank, but just the community in general, can help further, not necessarily directly with tribal governments, but also with some of the private financial incubators in these communities that need a little assistance, that need a little guidance, that need, from when I say assistance, not only just money, but also a little bit of experience and expertise to help start businesses, start jobs, sustain jobs, and to help. So individually, me personally, but also as a organization, we do are very involved at least with these tribes here, and people are itching to want to learn more to help start and be entrepreneurs and start businesses in those communities. So yes, and I hope that is the case across not only the Montana, but the country. I can't speak to the country, but I can speak specifically to those two.
Hey, Riley. Thanks for the question. So the Montana World Trade Center I mentioned, we're housed at the University of Montana, and we're actually part of a group of sort of outward facing business serving economic development focused entities. And one of those entities is AMRI, and I'm trying to think, it's something Rural Innovation Initiative. I wish I could remember all of the Accelerate Montana Rural Innovation Initiative. But my colleague there, Carl, whose last name I can never pronounce correctly, but suffice to say it starts with a U, and I will be happy to connect you. Carl with AMRI, one of their areas of focus is on kind of facilitating entrepreneurship in the more rural and tribal parts of our state. So what can they do to help fan the flames on entrepreneurship that would help to grow our, grow your own businesses on tribal lands, grow our own businesses in rural Montana. So that might be one thing that could help to positively influence and diversify economies in tribal communities across our state. One area where I have seen and where I think there's a real competitive advantage and a real business case too, is there are lots of opportunities with the federal government contracting. And I'm not going to get into the complexities of how that works, but there's a point system in place there that does favor some disadvantaged communities, and I know that a number of different tribes across the state have been pretty successful in securing federal contracting awards that then helps them to build out more robust, not just that business in their communities, but that brings more money back to their communities and allows them to be more proactive in supporting other kind of business growth and putting infrastructure in place to help other businesses take hold. So I wish I had the perfect answer there, but those are some things that, might be helpful. So I'll look up Carl's info and I'll put it in the chat here.
I'll just say I live on the Flathead Indian Reservation. The Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes operate this reservation. They are, I think, a very, very successful tribe in the way that they've been able to create businesses here. They have the SK Technologies, which is a federal contractor, again, as sort of Brigitte has mentioned. They have the Salish Kootenai College, a 4-year college with a whole variety of offerings there. I think that what the question you're raising underscores one thing, and that is that tribal communities, minority communities, Black, Hispanic, have been hit much harder by COVID and often have less in the way of resources to help deal with it. I do see, here just the federal government is I think aware of that. So there has been a pretty good amount of assistance to this tribe anyway, and I'm sure others as well. For example, getting Pfizer vaccines up here for the tribe. But yeah, I think that there is, I would say today, there's a greater recognition of the need to try to reach out and support some of these underserved communities that in the past sometimes have been overlooked. So I think for the future, you're going to probably see more opportunities for reservations and tribal communities to, take more advantage of some of the programs and the innovations that exist. Don't know if we have time for another question or not, but I hope so, Greg.
Well, I thought, we are only going till 9:15 or 10:15 Mountain Time. So I just got the word from Kathleen. But I too want to just a quick thanks to these kids, because you guys are not seeing the entire chat, because I've got quite a few direct messages going back and forth to the people that are asking questions, and Brooke and some of the other ones. It's just amazed me how savvy you kids are at keeping track of this stuff, because I'm trying to do my best and they're keeping me in line by making sure I got the right question order and stuff like that. So pretty darn awesome. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris. I apologize for the questions that we didn't get to, and turn it back over to Chris and get some closing remarks from him.
Couldn't agree with you more, Greg. The questions from the students are amazing. Thank you all so much for really engaging on this and our other events this week. And special thanks to our panelists. I think the depth and complexity of the issue is extraordinary, and your ability to convey that to us in a meaningful and understandable way, outstanding. I really appreciate it. I think what I kind of come away with is something that Joanna said in her opening remarks, which is this idea of a roller coaster, and throughout the entire event, we saw, things are positive, but, that effect could have some negative implications otherwise or in the future. And so it's not always so cut and dried, is it, when we speak about the economy or other complex issues like this? So thanks again to the three of you for really conveying that sense that it's not quite so simple, and there are a lot of issues to be thinking about. Let me just also remind our students and our participants that next up is Ambassador Kurt Tong talking about global protests in Hong Kong, and that will be our final distinguished speaker session here, leading up to tomorrow's knowledge competition for Day 4 Academic WorldQuest. So I hope to see all of you at 10:30 with Ambassador Kurt Tong. And for the teachers who are online, don't forget that we have at 12 noon our third and final OPI credit course with our friends from Inspired Classroom. Greg, once again, thanks a lot for the facilitation. Thanks to our panelists and to the students. Everybody be well. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and thanks, and good luck, all you students. You're great. Take good care.